First of all, I want to thank you on behalf of the second international conference of What If World History. It is for me very engaging to discuss those subjects. As I told you before, I was in last year presenting also a statement about my work regarding literature, novels and theater. This year we have on this session three different presentations from three very different subjects with a common aspect of what if. And welcome you once more. I will give the floor to Daipayan Paul that is going to speak about his research on the fusion of Buddhism and Brahmanism with the Naga clan of Indian subcontinent. And you have 15 minutes. After that, I will pass to other of our guests. And at the end, we are going to discuss these themes for some 15-20 minutes. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for this presentation, for giving me the chance and the invitation for the presentation. Actually, my research work is on the Naga culture that I have already told. So, without wasting any time, I will talk about my research work. So, India has been an important center of diverse religions and cultures since ancient time, where solidarity of different communities and cultures can be observed. Any analysis of this diverse culture would be fertile without referencing the Nagas. The Naga clan is indisputably one of the most voiceless groups mentioned in the ancient history. There is no doubt that the dominant philosophies like Buddhism and the Brahmanism created a great star among the people in ancient times. But at the same time, these two cultures assimilated the prose of other rare cultures to perpetuate their influence among the people. As a result of the synthesis of certain aspects of the so-called dominant and rare cultures, there occurred an amalgamation in the ancient culture of the Indian society. This fascinating stream of Indian culture creates the context of curiosity and attraction to the world. If we talk about the Buddhist culture or the Buddhist tradition, then we look one aspect that becomes very clear that it is that the Buddhist tradition portrays the Nagas always barbaric, cruel, and also the fierce. However, the Naga renounced their barbaric nature by worshipping the Buddha and eventually followed the path of peace. In the Buddhist text, architectural motifs and the other sources like the coins and the inscriptions associated with Buddhism, the Nagas received a different representation in the sense that a refined and culturally tamed characteristic was associated with the Nagas, who had earlier been a wrecked group and become civilized only when they came in the contact of Buddhism. In different Buddhist texts, we get very varied narrative of the tussle between the Nagas and Buddhism and the ultimate reconciliation of the Nagas through the pacifying spirit of Buddhism. In one textual narrative contained in the renowned text of the Mahavansha, we come to know of the legend of the Naga king Arvalo. This is very important because of that, sorry, who ruled in Naga king Arvalo, who ruled in the Kashmir Gandhara region, and under whose rule the subject suffered immensely because of the tyrannical rule and persecution of King Arvalo. The Mahavansha account states that during the rule of Mauryan Emperor Ashoka, Masantiku was sent to Kashmir to save the people for the extremely violent rule of the Naga king Arvalo, and eventually this violent Naga king was ordained as Buddhist monk to the desertion of his Naga life. So here we can understand that Naga culture always a voiceless group. They cannot or they could not renounce or represent their own culture front of the world. Because of that, the history of the voiceless group like Naga culture always written by the dominant ideologies like Buddhism that I have talked already. The architectural symbols of the Buddhist stupas are extremely significant mediums for the power equation between Buddhism and the Nagas, and the Varu sculpture have some interesting depiction of the Nagas. A close look at the Naga objects of the Varu sculpture would make it clear that this formidable clan of the Nagas had been mostly depicted in the Varu stupas as belonging to the lower state of the society. They are depicted as inferior in status to the Yakshas or Yakshanis as well. The Nagas have been represented as followers of Lord Buddha and not as depicted devotee of Lord Buddha also. Now the paradox is that even if the treatment meted out to the general Nagas is largely pejorative, the Naga king Muchulinda is created as the savior of the Buddha from rain and wind, and this preferential treatment of the Naga king Muchulinda can be logically explained if his status as the Naga king can be taken into account. Thus, the architectural and cultural evidences alongside the text and indicated of the assimilation of the Nagas under the rubric of Buddhism, along being assigned a somewhat magical status per se. So, the Naga king, the voiceless Naga king, always gave a formidable position as a unit of the society. The Naga culture renounced their power or renounced their position as a unit, as a powerful unit, as a hierarchical unit of the society. This total significance or this total significance or this total scenario could not be possible by the Nagas. Because of that, there was a voiceless group in the ancient Indian society. Now, if we talk about the Brahmanism, so Nagas have a very prominent, obviously, but a complex position in the Brahminical culture. Turning over our attention to the opening chapter of the Mahabharata, Adi Parvan, we will see that this text is singularly rich in myths and sagas relating to the Nagas. A mythological account of the origin of the Nagas is found in this Brahminical text. This ancient text mentions the marriage of Kashyapa with his two wives, Kadru and Vinata. After the marriage, the Kashyapa's two wives received dowries from their husband, while Kadru wanted from the bridegroom of 1,000 Naga sons. Vinata wanted only two sons, Aruna and Garuda, who, as the narrative says, will be more powerful than the 1,000 Naga sons of Kadru. According to the ancient Brahmanical text, Vinata is described as the goddess of heaven, and it is uncertainly intriguing that Vinata, who is described as the celestial woman, along with her sons, with remarkable magnificence by the Brahmanical writers, thereby unrelieving the biased attitude of the Brahmins for the highest state of the Brahmanical culture over the Nagas, who certainly did not share the same hierarchical status like the Brahmins. Although various Brahmanical authors refers to the Nagas as the celestial serpents belonging to Surya. However, the relationship between Aruna and Garuda, who is the son of Kadru, I have already said that, is much more closely related to God Surya than the relationship of the Nagas. Aruna, as is well known, is the charioteer of Surya Dev, and Garuda is the carrier of Lord Vishnu. In this case, both of them were associated with Surya Dev, but their individual was intact. However, the narrative of the Puranas have robbed the Nagas of their individuality by way of their inclusion in the Brahmanical region as the associated of Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva, and by way of this incorporation, the individual existence of the Nagas was dissolved by Brahmanization. Several scholars, including James Ferguson, have therefore stated that the Indian serpent culture was adopted by the Aryans from the Dashus. Thus, one may argue that the process of amalgamation of the Nagas within the spell of Brahmanical culture was a complex process. The ancient Naga clan was a formidable opponent of the Aryans. Puranas tell us that the Naga rule had flourished at places like Vidisha, Kantipur, Mathura, and Padmavati. The Nagas of the Vidisha region were divided by the Puranas into two groups. One of these was the group which flourished during Sunga rule, and to his other group belonged the Naga Shesha, Naga Vujin, Naga Ramchandra, Naga Dharmvarma, and Naga Vangada. To the other rare groups belong Naga Bhutanandi, Shishunandi, Purush Datta, Uttam Datta, Kama Datta, Bhav Datta, and also Shivanandi or the Shiva Datta. According to K.P. Jaiswal, the last 5 kings are known only from their inscription and coins, and their order of succession is uncertain. The rule of these 13 Naga rulers covered a period of 200 years from 100 BC to 78 AD. It is easy to understand that the Nagas developed a prosperous system of governance in ancient India. Allowed by this rise of this important power, the representatives of the Nagas, we can cite the instance of Ohi, the chief of the Naga clan, with whom the Aryans had a major conflict. However, we have already discussed that the Naga clan was a voiceless group of Indian history. The formidable strength of this group and the rich culture of the Nagas indisputably become a cause of alarm, promoting the writers of the Brahmanical texts to devise different mechanisms to accommodate this different group, while the fold of Brahmanism to eliminate possibilities of future conflicts and tensions. So, this brief discussion has sought to make a point about the different trajectories through which the Naga culture was accommodated by the two prominent religion culture tradition of Buddhism and Brahmanism. Although the Nagas are mentioned in various ancient literatures of the Indian subcontinent and several scholarly studies are present on them, but no significant study of this group have emerged in recent scholarship. In the Brahmanical literature, the Nagas were invariably merged with Brahmanical deities, thereby denying any independent space to them. By this, their oldest traditional existence was perpetually destroyed. They received a somewhat derogatory position in the Buddhist religions culture as well as exemplified in this article from the textual Buddhist religion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daipayan. I'm spelling correctly your name, Daipayan.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank
Yes,
you.
I will.
Thank you for your scrupulous use of time. Thank you for for me, an introduction to the Naga culture. It was very interesting. We are moving on, and later we are returning to you to discuss some aspects regarding what you have just told us. And we are moving now to Pedro Filipe Pousada, my colleague in Portugal, in University of Coimbra.
I've been developing with my colleague, Dr. Vera Araújo. She's a PhD from University of Coimbra. And we have been we have started to use this, let us say, methodological catalyst, the what if question, and what if to problematize aspects of contemporary Brazilian art, specifically the works of three very strong, very powerful and radical creators from the late 60s, early 70s Brazilian artists, Silvio Meirelles, Artur Barrio, and Maiolino. We basically want to ask if politically engaged art practices exists, and they exist in conditions of repression, of political, social, cultural repression. What is the scope of these practices when basic political freedom and artistic autonomy are not at stake? So we put the question, what if there was no, these are works of art that were developed in the context of the Brazilian military dictatorship between 1964 1985. This is the scope, the timeline of this dictatorial period, which is still somehow prevails, its influence, its nefarious influence prevails in the history of Brazil, in contemporary Brazil. And we ask, what if there was no dictatorship? Because though the political repression, the censorship were very active, the repression against working class trade unionists, left-wing politicians, etc., was the scope of this political and social and cultural structure that was controlling the life in Brazil in this period. Nowadays, we still see the prevailing of in contemporary Brazil of violence, of a timeless presence of blood and pain in Brazil history that has become also very active in recent years. So, what if these works of art, of radical art that at the same time that postulates and tries to counter, to work as to counter the influence of the military dictatorship on society, and to put questions on this repressive regime. What if these works of art were developed in the context of a democratic society? Because though these actions are developed, their context is very specific in the history of art in Brazil. They belong to this new generation of artists that kind of get away from the conventions of art making or of art mediation, and they are no longer doing painting or doing sculpture. They are doing conceptual or post-conceptual art. They're using devices that don't belong, that are not immediately recognized as forms of art. So they question also the conditions, the nature of art. But this new generation is trying to work in a guerrilla mode to counter the effects, the negative effects of censorship in Brazil. For instance, Silvio Meirelles' ideological circuits insertions this project of banknotes, where he stamps this question: who killed Herzog? Herzog was a journalist, Brazilian journalist that went to an interview at the secret police headquarters in São Paulo to make statements about his political activity, and he was found dead. There was a suicide, a staged suicide, but the fact remained that he didn't commit suicide. He was killed by the police. There was a post-mortem, the autopsy proved that he was killed by the police, and this was a scandal because he was a well-known journalist, and there was no reason whatsoever to this to be happening in the context of the late period of the military dictatorship. So this became a very strong political event that influenced the actions of many artists. One of them was Silva Meirelles, and he was you use this device, the banknote money from Brazil, usually a money that was one cruzeiro was regularly used in the daily activity of Brazilians, and he stamped these questions to keep in mind that there was political violence in Brazil every day during the dictatorship. But this is not something that doesn't happen today. So what's the real effect? What's the real power of this? What if this there was no dictatorship, but the violence, the racial, the social violence remained? What would be the impact of would this kind of artworks be developed? Would they be used as a means to criticize, to dismantle, to put in question the Brazilian society, the racially profiled society that excludes so many people, that use security forces as a means to repress and to maintain under control so many communities, and to in fact to impose state violence and social violence on these communities. What if this reality was explored by these artists? We know that Meirelles, after the political execution of violent execution of Marielle, the Rio de Janeiro politician that was killed by still unknown killers, but we know for sure that it was a political murder. Meirelles produced this similar action that reminds us of his work with Herzog, where the question is the same: who killed Marielle? The questions remain. And also Artur Barrio, for instance. Artur Barrio did this action, this very bizarre 14 mysterious bloody muggles. These muggles appeared on the banks of a river that no longer exists in Belo Horizonte, and he was mimicking the techniques of body dumping by death squads and state terror police, and he was kind of creating a situation where people gathered to see what was going on, to understand what was happening, and this was also a kind of interference in the political and aesthetical interference in the daily routines of a society that had naturalized repression, had naturalized the barbaric modes of these kind of repressions. And so what if this was also explored and deployed in the context of contemporary democratic Brazil? Because we know, for instance, that hang on a second. We know for sure that this continues. We can remember, for instance, the environmentalist and trade unionist Chico Mendes was violently killed, murdered at his home in 1988, already 3 years after the end of the dictatorship. We can see the statistics about violence against indigenous and social workers has not stopped in Brazil in the early decades of this century. Things continue to be very dangerous and very violent for people that try to react, to resist against social injustice in Brazil. So why is there also, we are wondering why is this this kind of subjects, why they are not explored? If there was no, what if there was no dictatorship in Brazil, but the violence remains, the apartheid, the political and racial repression remain? Would these artists have had developed this kind of work? Would they be active against this this very poorly developed and just democracy in Brazil that needs to be changed and needs to go forward? Would they act? Would they be active in these processes? Because well, for instance, with the very ironic image of painting of Ana Maria Maiolino, the hero, which is just opposing the figure of the kind of a nonsense, the figure of the military as a symbol of death. But there is still a very strong fascination, and we saw this in the last elections, with the figure of the myth of the dictatorship, the myth of the powerful leader, the militaristic conception of political power, etc. So where are these artists? Where is their activism when it's when we need to involve ourselves in this changes? What if radical art is just radical when things go wrong, extremely wrong, but when the things are naturalized, when democracy is a facade and violence keeps on going underneath? Is this this is also a question that we want to find some answers about. Thank you very much. I'm going to finish my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you you too, Pedro, for your presentation about art and dictatorship. I noticed two what ifs in your paper, but we are going to move forward. Thank you very much. And finally, to close the panel before the questions, I will present Iren Boyarkina. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly or close from that. And she has studied some literature regarding with dystopias, and this presentation is just about the considerations that she's going to make about the well-known novel of George Orwell, the 1984. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the presentation. So the supposition which I'm going to study in this paper is indeed, what if we were living in the dystopic world of 1984? I would say that it's hardly possible to overestimate the significance of the science fiction genre for the development of society, as well as its attempt to consider the ways of creating utopian society. Science fiction, as well as utopian authors, frequently think about the destiny and evolution of society, and one of the most blood-chilling dystopias of the 20th century is 1984 by George Orwell, which some scholars narrow-mindedly consider a satire of the USSR, while in reality, quote, Orwell insisted until his death in 1950 that the book was a warning against corruption in general, regardless of the political systems that engenders it, end quote. In 1984, Orwell describes a rigidly stratified society, which is maintained through a highly elaborated control system. Indeed, this state is constantly spying its citizens and controlling even their minds and consciousness by various means. And the citizens are video monitored 24 hours a day by telescreens placed in their homes. And if someone tried to hide from a telescreen or deactivate it, he or she is immediately punished. Every action is controlled, since colleagues, friends, family members are encouraged to report any strange ideas or actions. If found guilty, these citizens are taken to the Ministry of Love, where they are tortured. If released, their brains are completely reformatted. All the countries are constantly at war with each other, and there are constant shortages of everything due to that. This constantly changing situation constantly makes all the data false or obsolete, and the Ministry of Truth is ceaselessly correcting newspapers, books, encyclopedias, etc., in accordance with the new political alignment. But what if we were living in Orwell's dystopic world instead of our real world? The present paper is going to study this imaginative situation, as well as analyze the differences between the dystopic world of 1984 and our present-day world, using the alternative history methods as an effective means of analysis. It should be pointed out that the idea of alternative history is closely related to a certain physical hypothesis from the quantum physics, namely a many worlds interpretation by Hugh Everett. Indeed, the existence of a multiverse made up of multiple, perhaps infinite alternatives have been seriously considered by physicists since 1957, when Hugh Everett III proposed the relative state formulation theory, also known as theory of universal wave function. Years later, Bruce DeWitt learned or renamed and popularized Everett's theory by calling it many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. In short, such an interpretation states that everything that can happen, will happen, or has already happened in some alternate universe. So contemporary physicists like David Deutsch and philosophers like David Lewis advocate that there are other universes where counterparts do exist, hence other histories, that is, alternative histories, also do exist. And it's worth mentioning that this speculation about the existence of alternate realities is not exactly new, since it appeared even among ancient philosophers like Cicero, Democritus, and so on. So perhaps the reality in which we live is not the only one. Other universes ruled by different physical constraints are probably as real as the universes that resemble our own. Despite sounding fictional, such a hypothesis has been sustained by both physicists and philosophers in different approaches. So that's why our ideas about alternate history can have much more basis than in fact we think. And it is exactly in on these approaches that the idea of possible alternate histories is based. When it comes to contemporary philosophy, a famous example is that of David Lewis, who writes, quote, there are so many other worlds, in fact, that absolutely every way that a world could possibly be is a way that some world is, end quote. Besides, it's worth mentioning that Lewis is not talking about imaginary worlds. On the contrary, he states that there are as real as ours. By defending the theory that every possible scenario is maybe true somewhere, even the most bizarre one ever imagined, anything conceived as just possible is interpreted as effectively real in some universe. However interesting such ideas are, not demonstrable and remain in the field of pure speculation. As bizarre as it is all sounds, there is nothing to fear, since Lewis himself conceives these alternate universes and alternative histories, consequently, as absolutely disconnected. Therefore, our reality cannot suffer any invasion from other worlds. After all, according to this philosopher, quote, there are countless other worlds, and they are not remote. Neither are they nearby, so they are not at any spatial distance whatever from here. They are not far in the past or future, nor, for that matter, near. They are not at any temporal distance whatever from now. They are isolated. There are no spatial-temporal relations at all between things that belong to different worlds. Nor does anything that happens at one world cause anything to happen in another, nor do they overlap. They have no parts in common, with an exception, perhaps, of immanent universals exercising their characteristics, privilege of repeated occurrences, end quote. So what if issues are common ground in fiction, and especially in science fiction? Departing from a deviation of the known timeline, authors speculate how the world would be if X has happened instead of Y. What if the United States has lost the Revolutionary War? In such plots, authors are limited only by their own imagination, and the universes they create are restricted within insurmountable borders. The idea of other universes inhabited with our alternative versions has been increasingly intriguing since Cicero's writing millennia ago. Now, coming back to our question, what if we were living in Orwell's dystopic world instead of our own world? As said, the state in 1984 is constantly spying its citizens and controlling even their minds and consciousness by various means. And what happens in our world around us? Nowadays, thanks to the advancements of the fourth industrial revolution, the vast majority of the population has access to internet via computers and smartphones. People leave their digital footprints on various sites, so it is possible to track their search history, personal preferences, their opinion on various subjects, and all this data is stored by huge corporations in the database. All this information can be effectively processed and organized by artificial intelligence, which becomes more and more efficient in analyzing big data storages. On the basis of this analysis, it's very easy to combine all the personal data about any individual from different internet sites and create a rather precise psychological, political, economical portrait of any individual. Moreover, this collected data can be either sold for marketing purposes or used, for example, for election purposes or in social ranking systems, as in some countries, for example, China. In such a system, an amount of benefits is controlled by the state on the basis of individuals' behavior, which is easily traced following persons' digital footprints. Moreover, in our world, if some people think that they can express themselves freely without any control and interference from the state, then these people are severely mistaken. There is some official information about the agreements between such platforms as Twitter, Facebook, and so on, and the governments about the possibility for the government to enter these platforms from a special backdoor portals using the official governmental mail and delete posts that the government doesn't like or deplatform people that the government doesn't like. Suffice it to mention in this case how Donald Trump, who was deplatformed by Twitter, though he had millions of followers, and this is not the only example. Next, in the world of 1984, citizens are video monitored 24 hours a day by telescreens placed in their homes. And in the world around us, we can be easily traced not only outside of our homes by innumerable video cameras that now are more and more connected to each other, see, for example, smart city projects, but also at home. For example, a smart home system makes your life more comfortable, automatically regulating air and water temperature, humidity, lights, sound, etc. at home. But in the meantime, it's not so difficult to deduct your activities, preferences, and much more from your smartphone system data. Actually, I don't need to spend a lot of time explaining how people expose their personal sensitive data while using smartphones and navigating internet, as this has already become a commonplace point. I can only add that with further development of artificial intelligence, all this data processing becomes quicker and quicker. Also, artificial intelligence can process very quickly all the information from video cameras in the streets, and today, with the face identification programs, it is possible to know all your movements from the moment you leave your home till the moment you return. Not only your movements and behavior can be easily traced, but also your payment history, especially with the introduction of the Pay with Your Face program. Another trend that embraces the mode of payment and individuals' control by the state or corporations is the introduction of digital programmable currency. President of the United States has recently signed a law about the introduction of the digital programmable currency. Please don't confuse it with cryptocurrency, which is generated via blockchain technologies and is stable forever. Digital programmable currency must soon substitute paper money, and its value can be changed or reprogrammed according to the economic situation, like currency devaluation and so on, and according to the individual's behavior, when the amount of money he or she possesses on the accounts can be changed according to the person's behavior, which in its turn can be traced via internet, video cameras, etc. As said, your mind can be controlled via internet by the digital footprint that you leave. Thanks to artificial intelligence, all this information can be quickly extracted from various databases and be analyzed so that your personal dossier is ready in no time. That means that nowadays people are monitored for various purposes 24 hours a day, as in the imaginary world of 1984. Suffice it to mention the case of Edward Snowden, who disclosed how the US government spies and controls its citizens. Of course, the state doesn't want people to know that they are spied, so it's not for nothing that Snowden had to leave the country and seek political asylum. As said, the fourth industrial revolution provides more and more possibilities for new technologies. Some of them can make tracing things and people much easier. For example, Klaus Schwab describes some 30 tipping points that can be realized by the year 2025 with high probability. For example, one of such tipping points is a smartphone implanted directly into a human body. Clothes will be equipped with internet. Or in the cities with a population over 50,000 people, all the traffic lights will be substituted by artificial intelligence that will coordinate and control the traffic. Sensors that can be placed on goods to control their movement along the supply chain will become common. Similar sensors can be placed also on people. The invention of new materials allows to use these materials in various fields, but also for tracking. For example, one of these materials is graphene with new outstanding physical qualities. So it can be used in many fields like diodes, integrating photonic circuit devices, touch panels, smart windows of phones. Smartphones products with graphene touchscreens are already on the markets. But the most interesting use of graphene, in this case liquid graphene, for our topic of human tracking, is its use for medical purposes. Nanoparticles of liquid graphene can function as carriers of medicines and can deliver treatment to the necessary parts of the human body. This principle is already used in some cancer therapies. However, in the meantime, these nanoparticles of liquid graphene can also function as sensors described above and can ensure tracking of human bodies. Also, in 1984, all the states are constantly at war with each other, and in the real world, there are also constantly several wars in progress on physical battlefields. However, due to the advances of the fourth industrial revolution, the very concept of the warfare is changed. Suffice it to mention cyber warfare, information war, and so on. The character of the war is changed to such an extent that people might not even know that they are attacked, since nowadays not only the body is the object of the attacks, but also the minds of people. Think about the war of misinformation, fake news, propaganda, etc. I think I stop at this point because there are much more technical possibilities to track and control humans, but we don't have time for that. Anyway, the huge amount of the possibilities used to track and control people gave rise even to a special term introduced by Shoshana Zuboff that perfectly describes our reality, and that is surveillance capitalism. In short, surveillance capitalism is an economic system centered around the capture and commodification of personal data for the core purpose of profit making. So these are only some examples which clearly demonstrate that nowadays in our world, people are monitored and controlled by the state almost in the same way as in the world of the novel 1984. Actually, it will not be a big exaggeration to say that these two worlds are not much different from each other as far as the state control and espionage is concerned. Actually, they are so similar that we might say that it's one and the same world. So, coming back to our suggestion, what if we were living in Orwell's dystopic world instead of our real world? It seems that we are already living in the dystopic world of 1984. Also, if we turn to our alternate history proposition, we can say that another proposition we can make, that what if the Soviet Union were not dissolved in 1991, and in that case, affirmations of some literary scholars that Orwell's 1984 is a satire on the Soviet Union could have at least some grounds, since they were claiming this while the USSR was still existed. But as we know, in our world, the USSR ceased existing in 1991, while the alternative world of 1984, we thought it was alternative, but it turned out that it merged with our real world nowadays. And the advances of the fourth industrial revolution make this merge more and more striking with every coming year. Thus, we use an alternative history method for literary studies purposes to demonstrate that the statement by some scholars that the Soviet Union was the object of the satire in 1984, as well as the cause for provoking the appearance of the dystopic world of 1984, is wrong. So, this country doesn't exist anymore, while the world of 1984 does exist, and we live in it right now. Thank you very much for your attention. So I think I'm precisely on time, 60 minutes.
Yes, Irene, thank you very much. It was very engaging, and of course you are on time. Okay, thank you all for your very interesting and challenging presentations. I will sum up very quickly. The first one about the Naga culture, regarding architecture, cultural aspects, engaging and giving us some aspects related with the cultures. The second one related with other geography, with Brazil, not Asia but Brazil, about the aspects regarding dictatorship, art, with some hypotheses that Pedro highlights, and finally Irene that discussed Orwell, George Orwell, 1984, and present a very engaging hypothesis that we are living right now on that regime, on that mostly because of surveillance. I hope I made a short sum up of the three presentations, and now we are starting the debate. I myself have some questions, but I think it's important to start for the audience, for our audience. Please. I can read a question to Dr. Irene from YouTube. Do you think that the parallelism between 1984 and Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale can be made for society today? And if so, is the fictional path of almost alternative history portrait in those books is less and less alternative and more a reality?
Well, actually, yes, that's exactly what I was trying to say, that while we used to think that the world of 1984 is a part of, maybe is alternative history, which could have taken place after a certain revolution, certain dictatorship. But nowadays, when we see all the results brought along with the fourth industrial revolution, the results that allow the state, more even than the state, the corporations which are merging with the states, to control every human activity, mainly for the advantages, of course, of making profits. Yes, that is exactly the case, that these histories are becoming less and less alternative. And as far as the Handmaid's Tale is concerned, after the beginning, there is already some data is released also by CDC, and if you look at their page, there are still no comments, but if you look at the page, then you can see that there are also declines in fertility and the number of kids born. So actually, it's possible to see that while in the Handmaid's Tale, this explanation of the lack of fertility, natural fertility, was caused due to a pandemic, unfortunately, also nowadays, we see that there is exactly the same decline, also due to pandemics. It's still not clear enough while it was due to pandemic, due to virus, or maybe due to the vaccination, but still, we see already the parallelism. So that's again another case which is showing, unfortunately, that these alternative histories are getting less and less alternative, and they're merging with our reality. So we should try to understand how not to make it happen finally. So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Irene. And what else?
Can I just about this about dystopia? I was reminded by Zamiatin Zwi. I don't know if you if you could discuss the influence of the novel by Zamyatin, Evgeny Zamyatin, on 1984, if there was any, and also I think to quote some. I think reality is always. I think I'm quoting. I'm not sure if I'm wrong, but I'm quoting Lenin saying that the reality is more radical than theory, and the fact is that since the beginning of the French, let us say, that's the modern states that derives from the French Revolution, and when the bureaucracy and public servants became a very significant, powerful entity in the development of the state, of the centralized state, that repression, means of repression, I think for each age, it's kind of dystopia and of bureaucratic control of lives and minds, because what happens in the 19th century, both in Victorian society or in French post-revolutionary society after the repression of the Commune, what happens with colonialism, what happens in the 20th century with colonialism, etc. All the developments, the modern developments, both in controlling populations, communities, and the sophistication of the means, of the devices to control populations during, for instance, our African wars in the 60s and 70s. State repression was, well, it was far more terrible for these communities that any story from 1984 onwards, any dystopian novel. It was reality using the means of the time, the technology of the time, the information cybernetics and information technology of the time to repress and to control. So basically, what the artists that I presented here, they are just making small conjunctions, small inferences on the fact that the state terror is so powerful and so its prevalence is so evident that any kind of artistic and cultural statement is always will be undermined by the pure amount of the tide of repression that comes when it comes in on the context of dictatorship, or either on dictatorship or in democracy, meaning that modern societies are designed to impose both either by violence or either by bureaucratic means, but to impose on us a set of behaviors or protocols. So the question is there a way out from all this dystopian context?
Is this a question to me?
Yes. If there is a way out, if you think there is a way out, because the sense is it's becoming more and more entangled, and it's a long history of entanglements of the human, of subjectivity, and of the human, of humans in general.
Well, actually, I don't know whether there is a way out and which one is the correct one. Only the characteristic difference of the last stage we are currently living now of capitalism, according to the theorists of capitalism. So the merge of the corporations and the states. So the states, both the states and corporations, they share the power. But while the state is still taking care of the less privileged members of the society, the corporations are mainly interested only in the profits. So if the power will be finally left to corporations, I think all people, so those people who are less protected and just with different needs, I don't want to enumerate, the list is very long, but then all these people will be automatically left without any devices or any possibilities for survival. And this, I think that's a little bit different. That's the main difference confronting with the previous situations, previous epochs that you mentioned before. So if there will be really this marriage of, or maybe if the corporations are really substituting the states, then I think there will be not so much of the way out. While in a certain given state, maybe it's possible to have a revolution, but to have a global revolution, I think it will be hardly possible, especially with all the possibilities of artificial intelligence and all other means to control the world globally. So if there were such an answer, I think we wouldn't have these conferences trying to find out how it's possible to go. Because on the other way, on one hand, people, of course, are using the fruits or the advantages of the fourth industrial revolution, because actually now it's very difficult to stay behind, to have an internet or using other advantages of the modern society. But on the other hand, all the instruments can be used for both ways, just for the advantage of people and against them. So being connected to internet can represent also advantages, but can also represent very big disadvantages. So maybe the only possibility is just trying to warn people about the dangers they're facing when they're using one or another instrument provided by the fourth industrial revolution. Like there are three aspects in the fourth industrial revolution, namely physical, digital, and I think the digital one, I think people should be really well informed about that. But also about technologies, I think people also should get the right information. But as I said, it's the information on internet is very easily controlled. So of course you will not find any information which is really thought provocative. So for this reason, since the most huge medias are already owned by magnates like by Bill Gates, who is owning also BBC, Al Jazeera, things like that. So you will not get maybe any alternative information which can make you start thinking. So that's the main difficulty. It's very difficult to find information which can help you maybe fight against the dangers we are facing now. So the only way out maybe is trying to search in alternative sources, just trying to use maybe the results of the alternative journalism, alternative researchers, which are not funded by corporations or the government. So that's the only possibility. And what do you think about that? What do you think are the ways to avoid that?
Well, I think that we were never off the grid, even when there wasn't this digital world surrounding us. I remember, as you were talking, I remember that when I reached the age of 18, I was informed that I should go to the military department to do the physical inspection. So state always knew that I existed for means of turning me into eventually a device for to be used on a hypothetical let us say war or on a conflict environment. So citizens are always on the concept of citizenship also implies the understanding that we are inside the grid. What this all these powerful structures, corporate structures that control the digital world can do is also they can do all these things also because we are willing to accept their we are willing them in the sense that we are in such a way involved. We Google for information. We use Microsoft software. We use streaming TV, online streaming channels, etc. We consume all these products produced by them, and it's very difficult not to do that. But also, if we follow the reasonable argument of Marx that we should always doubt everything, puts in doubt everything. It's a Cartesian concept also. Always doubt about in the information we get. After all these years, after all the lies of the Iraq invasion in 2003, the 20 years in Afghanistan, etc., people still consume corporate narratives about what's going on in the global fight for energy and for the economics. So probably we should be more demanding with ourselves and look, as you were saying, for alternative understandings and interpretations of what's going on. It's always a question of never accept the given. It's the exercise of philosophy that is the true, probably one of the means to escape. And this is a philosophical device, the what-if concept. It's more than it's just an historical device. It's in a philosophical, because it puts in the sense an alternative timeline to explain and to explore alternative ways of looking at reality as it is today. And this, for me, it's the most effective way of countering this this powerful design of reality that has been, but a design that has been working on since the beginning of cinema, for instance, cinema as propaganda, and in the West, for instance, in Hollywood. It's the way we see the other, the otherness, the consciousness of the other is something that also is very important for us to go beyond official narratives, to go beyond very Eurocentric or very North Atlantic hegemonic interpretations of reality. And this is something that can be done also through looking at the artwork and art production and art history from different geographies, from different realities. This gives us a different positional understanding of the world. And I think culture and art and culture, culture in the broader sense, is one of the main devices to escape, to resist this global sameness that is being designed by corporations all over the capitalist corporation all over the world. It's a design that is already, you can see the same skylines in New York, Paris, London, Moscow, etc., Shanghai, whatever. But what's fundamental is that the people are not designed the same way, don't see the world the same way, and then this difference and these contradictions are things that give us a better understanding, a better assessment of the reality beyond the visualization, the design that corporate politics and state politics want us to have about that same reality. This is something that I think is very useful and very valuable to work with in an effort to oppose this hegemonic narrative that dominate nowadays realities. I don't know if I made myself clear, probably not.
Yeah, absolutely clear. Yeah. Unfortunately, also the young people, they are much more eager to believe these modern narratives because especially the fashion to use TikTok, I think it's a really mind-changing device because I noticed that these young people are less and less able to comprehend long or serious written texts. Even I know that, so it's only because they are watching non-stop all the videos, short videos, and the written text becomes really very complicated and now boring for them. I even have some colleagues in academia, they say, yeah, if there is a presentation where there is only text show, text show, just material, no images, I just cannot understand. I don't like this presentation. But it means that also academicians are losing some of them are losing this possibility to comprehend complicated texts and complicated images, complicated concepts. So that's indeed a rather startling situation. The changing of the world perception, the changing of the way the human mind works. So just trying to exemplify everything and to present information in as simple way as possible. So the people sooner or later will lose the ability to think critically. I think that is also the danger. So,
well, I think
sorry,
yeah,
it's quite Orwellian regarding the language, simpler and simpler.
absolutely, absolutely. Because yeah, exactly. Newspeak, the final target was to make Newspeak as neutral, politically neutral. So every word must have only one significance, and with these words, it will be never possible to express revolutionary ideas, or if they appear, just it will be very easy to trace them and just to destroy these people who are bearing these ideas. So that's exactly what we are witnessing. More or less, we are going already in that direction. Just all the presentation of information what we have on the internet is teaching us to be relaxed and to just to search only for the easiest information, unfortunately. So kind of evolutionary, or I don't know, assisted evolutionary change, unfortunately. So we should try to resist these processes.
As you
sorry, Pedro. Sorry.
As you were commenting the fact that long texts are no longer popular among students, I'm reminding myself of there is this chapter on Notre Dame de Paris de Victor Hugo, which is ceci tuera cela, meaning that this will kill that. He was talking about Gutenberg press was killing the religious temple. As religious architecture was not just architecture itself, was the spiritual space with all the paintings, all the context, symbolic context, iconography, etc. The storytelling through images of the life of Christ and of the Old Testament, etc. And so the press, the printed text, was going to replace the image, and now we are seeing probably something similar, not in a so traumatic way, but I think that we are as animals, as members of the animal kingdom, we tend also to explore, to go beyond. We are both gregarious and critical of consensus, fabricated consensus. We always find, you will always find in the hegemonic context where people always say yes, a group of people that will say no. This is something that we can see throughout for instance, in the 20th century with the avant-gardes, with the people that are involved in the avant-gardes, and they criticize patriotism, war, belligerences. So they were pacifists, they were political dissidents, etc. So these realities will always reproduce themselves, not just the reality of acceptance and non-criticism and conformism. We are in between Ray Bradbury's 451 Fahrenheit and something else that we still don't know if it's good or bad in the future. But I think we can always be optimistic. Always the phrase by Gramsci is pessimistic in thoughts and optimistic in practice, meaning that we are always expect the worst, but we will always try to reach out for the best. It's something that should be considered when looking at the world through the Orwellian lenses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you, Daipayan, do you have any question or something to comment to add to the discussion? Well, regarding your theme, what was in your presentation the major? I would say that the major what if of Naga culture that you found?
Thank you for the questions. Actually, in this short time, it is very difficult to present my vast paper. Actually, what if my presentation, the Naga culture? I said already that the Naga culture was a very vast group mentioned in the Indian history. So we have the most difficult task that decode the history of voiceless group of ancient Indian society or ancient Indian world. Anything you can say. So the main task or the main document or the main data that we found, that the historians found from the past, this is already written by the voice who has the voices, like the dominant ideologies or the dominant clans in the ancient societies. But the voiceless group, like the Nagas, they have not the voice. They have not the power of written history. But this is the very difficult. So I wanted to present that what if the Naga culture can write the history or write the past, then what will what was the impact of their history. I am apologize to not clarify very properly my paper because of that. There is very short time. Sorry for again, but if the Nagas had the powers to written, then the Naga culture always get a very strong and very prominent position, like the Brahmanism and Buddhism. We all know that the Lord Buddha is a greatest religion leader in the world history. If we get any type of the written history of the Naga culture, any history by the written of the Naga culture or the Naga persons, then the Naga culture or the Naga entity, the embryonic entity of the Nagas will be a famous entity or the famous religion or the culture in the world. Actually, I wanted to present this total paragraph, but the short time I have to finish the total paper. Sorry for this again. Very, very sorry.
No problem. No need to sorry, because it was interesting and to explore different approaches. And of course, the what if in history is somewhat important because it exists on fiction. We all know alternate fiction, but also history as a science sometimes could use some authors had approached the hypothesis, and for instance, some historians designed and invented some rules to the what if in history. But of course, it's never an easy task, because sometimes what if could become revisionism, and but of course it's always it's important and challenge, because it can teach us something about determinism. The things are happen because they are going to happen, and this lead us to another question, both probably to Iren or to Pedro, that I think both can answer if you like. And the thing is something like, do you think that Orwell was some kind of prophet, or is on the forerun of some of these aspects, or do you think some authoritarian, some regimes, and even democracy nowadays, used some of his ideas? Since we have some examples, because in the early 20s, in the early 20th century, George Sorel wrote a book about violence in politics that was used profoundly by Mussolini in his approach with fascism in Italy. This is a question. The second one, also to Pedro, I would like to ask him, is that on a previous session, a colleague of us from Lisbon presented a paper about an hypothesis of carnation revolution. Hypothesis. It is a very an hypothesis from history about carnation revolution, but that's not really my question. My question was about a straight question. Probably if there wasn't a dictatorship in Brazil, and lately some major issues regarding that democracy, probably these authors that you mentioned, that you explore, could envision, could have produced different kinds of works, different approaches, with a less degree of violence. I think that's it. Thank you.
I'll try to answer very quickly. I think that if there was no political repression, censorship, military dictatorship during this period in Brazil, the fact remains that violence against minorities, indigenous minorities, social workers, trade unionists, Black Afro-American communities would continue, because the dictatorship was a reaction of important sectors of Brazilian society against the progressive developments of the previous governments, and also intertwined with the North American interests. We now know what was the Plan Condor, which was designed to stop communism in Central and South America, through whatever was needed to enforce this project, from massacres, death squads, to political repression, to military dictatorships, to military takeovers, whatever. So basically, it was already a violent society throughout since the 19th century. It's a society based on violence against slaves. It began as a slave. The independence of Brazil is the independence of a state of slave owners, and so this is something that still is structural to the Brazilian society. And probably what our question is why aren't more works like this in today's Brazil, democratic Brazil? Because conditions prevail, this kind of violence event, like the massacre of Candelaria. It was not, it didn't happen during the military dictatorship. Massacres against indigenous communities, in the communities in the big cities of São Paulo and Brazil, in prison environments, they don't happen. They didn't happen though they happen also during the dictatorship. They continue to happen afterwards during the democratic regime. So why are artists so far away from problematizing and producing subjects, objects, and installations, situations, whatever we want to call it, that put the finger on the wounds and expose this contradictions in this democracy. And why are they always working with visual metaphors and getting away from pinpointing what is really going wrong in their societies? This is something that it could be expand to other societies, in other democracies, Western democracies, where we can see people being killed in airports, being tortured to death in European airports by police, border police during interrogation, as it happened here in Lisbon recently, and all this violence, state violence that can happen in just a few seconds of a wrong turn or a wrong decision made by someone, and this is something that should be addressed also, because we still have all these problems even in Portuguese society: racism, exclusion, social marginalization of Afro-European communities. And so, why are artists so afraid of exploring these realms beyond the metaphor, beyond the hermetic, beyond the incomprehensible? Why aren't they exploring it in a more vivid way? This is something that we want to address in our research. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Very enlightening. Iren?
Well, just arguing along the same lines as Pedro was doing. Why do the artists afraid not facing these questions? Probably they are afraid of the same state violence. That can be one of the possible answers, or probably they just don't see these issues. So these are two possibilities. Also, I was thinking about the previous discussion about the change in the mode of communication. Like, printing by Gutenberg maybe put an end to the religious thinking, but what is happening nowadays is just what we see. Okay, if we switch over completely to the image transfer of information, we should forget that, for example, in natural sciences, which are really very vital for all spheres of our life, like maths and army, engineer, and everything like that, the scientific texts, they are monoreferential. So you cannot express the contents of this scientific text via images, unfortunately, because any image as a metaphor has at least several interpretations, at least two. So that's why I say that's a little bit dangerous trend. And if in this case, if we go back to such a novel written by Herbert Wells in 1933, The Shape of Things to Come, there he was also proposing a kind of alternative history and actually the transition from his contemporary society to the world states. And strangely enough, also nowadays we can see some parallelism with that, because according to Wells, the transition to the world state will be after the war, pandemics, famine, and only after that the population will be ready for the world state. But the question, what is interesting here, is that according to Wells, this state should be governed by the elites, intellectual elites. And that's what we can see or sense already now, that those people, I would say, who are more inclined to search for simple information, easy information, will definitely not be a part of these elites. So you see already the, how shall I say, dissociation of the society in two big stratums. So one stratum who is academically minded or able to see and comprehend very serious scientific issues will be on one part, while the other part of the population will be just like I don't know, a part of population that needs a shepherd, exactly those who are intellectually and academically minded. And this is also not a really very comfortable situation if we want to see. If you want to think about the humanity as a whole, and if we should think about, I don't know, inclusive society, which makes everyone comfortable and everyone heard, and that the needs of people should be answered or faced in the same I don't know, equal and just way. So I think this also, this desertification of the society is rather unnecessary. And then speaking about Orwell, who might be a prophet, yes, actually, when we see now how his prophecy coincides with our local current day condition, yes, it should be a prophecy. But in the meantime, if we take into consideration his experience in India, so he knew how the empire was controlling the mass media, erasing information, or just sending forwards the narrative which was convenient, or he also knew very well the dictatorship in Spain. So I think on the basis of this data, he just created an alternative world, an imaginary world, to where he extrapolated all these negative trends. And actually this extrapolation was rather accurate, unfortunately, as we see now. Maybe he didn't foresee the appearance of internet, but just the way to control people with mass media and the language is perfect. So this was a really very good guess on the basis, of course, of his experience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Irene. Okay, thank you, Daipayan. I don't know if he's still with us. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Irene. It was very engaging, very interesting. We could go on, but we have really to finish as we run out our time. I want to thank you all. Daipayan is with us again. I want to thank you all for your presentations. It was possible to discuss in spite of their different approaches or their different themes. I want to thank you on behalf of the organizations of the conference, and rest of a good day, and thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very nice discussion. Goodbye.
Nice discussion.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.